Welcome to Ready Set RC, and today we are doing the final thoughts review of the HPI Savage XL Flux. This is a 1/8 scale monster truck. We've done quite a few videos on this. I've ran approximately 6 to 8 packs on this truck at this point. I can definitely give you guys my views of how this truck has performed. For you guys that are new to Ready Set RC, welcome. Typically how we do these final thoughts videos, we go through 8 different topics. We go through electronics, where we speak about the controller, the ESC, the motor, the servo, the receiver. Then we touch on the drivetrain and how the drivetrain performed to us if we made any modifications to the drivetrain. We then touch on handling and suspension and how that performed with us on this truck. Touch on durability, which is how this truck has performed to this point in regards to breakages, anything to that extent. Workability, how it was for us to work on this truck, any repairs that we've done, how those repairs went. Support, speaking on any type of issues that we ran into the truck that we had to reach out to HPI or to the distributor of this truck. And then the opinionated parts of the discussion, is this truck worth it? And would I buy it again? Electronics, we are still, for the most part, running the stock electronics on this truck. There's about maybe one thing on this truck that I've changed in regards to electronics, and we'll talk about that too as well. I'm still running the stock transmitter and receiver. So I have the TF41 as the transmitter. It is long in the tooth. This is one of the controllers that I can't remember how far back I've been using the same controller with almost every HPI vehicle that I've ever gotten. And it has the flip-up antenna, foam wheel. It has every setting you're going to want on a ready-to-run controller. It takes 4 AA's. You have your throttle control, your EPA, everything about this. I've spoken more about this controller on the overview video. If you want to know more about it, go back to the overview video of this, my first video of the Savage XL Flux, and you can see more about it. But I thought this performed very well. Didn't cut out. Distance is never an issue. I've never had an issue with one of these controllers, and they perform very well. So between the transmitter and the receiver, no issues whatsoever. As for the ESC and motor, the ESC is 4S and 6S capable, so is the motor. It's a 2200 kV motor on this. As I stated before, I'm still running the stock electronics on here. 6S, this thing is insane. It is insane. I geared up, kept it on 4S, and it's still a nutball. I really enjoy this truck on 4S. I didn't see a need to go more than that on this truck, especially if you gear up. I believe I'm running a 17-tooth pinion on this right now. It's more than enough power for me. I enjoyed how I have it set up right now. In regards to that servo that came on the truck, I had to get rid of the stock servo. I'm currently running a 38 kilogram servo on there. It's a 38 kilogram servo on 6 volts. On 7.4 volts, it's a 40 kilogram servo. The ounces of torque that's on there is 528 ounces of torque for 6 volts, and for 7.4 volts, 556 ounces of torque. It is more than capable to move the tires that I have on this truck now. I have no issues in regards to that servo. It is an Amazon special, I think it's like a fan model is what they call it, but it's an Amazon special servo. It hasn't gone out on me. I enjoy how it performs, and I would definitely suggest of one of the electronics that you may want to swap out on this is going to be that servo on the truck. For these battery trays, they fit 2S and 3S packs with no issues. If you're running a 3S hard case, you may run into a little bit of an issue, but I found that 3S and 2S hard packs and soft packs fit in with no problems whatsoever. Drivetrain. Now this is where I decided to start swapping parts out on this truck. So the center diff on this truck is a lock center diff. Most of the trucks that you guys are going to run these days, it's an open center diff that's running in them. It allows the vehicle to distribute the power from front to rear a lot more easier than you're running with a lock center diff. What you also tend to run into with the lock center diff on this truck, broken differentials. I've watched it happen, heard stories about it. And one of those things is that running with the stock diff on there, and if you're just landing a little bit on throttle, you're going to break diffs. So one of the key things that a lot of guys have been doing is installing a center diff on there. There's two options that I'm aware of. which is the Alza center diff, and what I went with was the RC4Me center diff. The Alza center diff is a beautiful piece of machinery going in there. It is a perfectly machine-made structure. I was happy to see it in person when I did a bash out with Chris from Everyday RC. He brought his by, and that thing just looks perfect, guys. It looks amazing. But I had already installed the RC4Me on here. The RC4Me, what they do is they take the Vorza center diff, they keep it in the same housing that you get for the Savage XL Flux, but I'm trying to remember this. I did this quite a while ago. I remember something on the center diff that they sent just didn't match up, and I had to take the old one apart to match it up. Guys, if you've done the RC4Me center diff on yours, just put it in the comments below, because I can't remember what exactly I did when it came to the center diff and when they sent it to me. I believe it was the outdrives, but I could be wrong. But just put it in the comments below, guys, if you've done it before and what you've done, and so that anybody else looking for this can look through the comments and see it. But I swapped out the center diff on there. It's running spot on, guys. I mean, I love how it's set up. I did not change out the differential weight oils on the front or the rear. It's still running the stock on there. As I said, I keep it on 4S, so I believe if you're going to run it on 4S, so I believe if you're going to run it on 6S, by all means, start tuning out your diffs in reference to your diff oil. The stock oil that comes in the center from RC4Me, I believe, is 100 weight that they put in there. For me, as I said, it runs not getting any ballooning. I will get to that much later when I speak about the wheels and the tires that are on this truck. Outside of that, I didn't get any bent drive shafts. No center drive shafts were bent on this truck. No front drive shafts were bent on this truck. No rear drive shafts were bent on this truck. The truck held up well, and everything on this, you have dog bones in the front and dog bones in the rear. Nothing fell out, nothing broke. Those things held up pretty well to the bashing that I gave it, and I truly enjoyed how this truck performed and was holding up. So I must say that the drivetrain on there is pretty good. Just need to make sure that you're going ahead and installing a center diff on this truck. Handling and suspension, and I'm gonna stay here for just a little bit, guys. So first off, just how this truck drives. I can't speak on this truck in the stock form, because when I got this truck, it is not a new format. It is a truck that has been out there for a while. I will say that HPI, at least on this Savage XL Flux, the same strengths of this truck, the same issues that people saw in regards to the suspension are still on this one as of today. So a lot of the issues that you're aware of, a lot of the strengths that you're aware of, you're still going to be dealing with them on this truck. You're still going to need to do those upgrades. I decided to go with the Innovative RC shock mounts, and my plan for that was to install the LST shocks on here. So the Losi LST shocks are big bore shocks, perfect for the Savage XL Flux. The problem with the Losi LST shock, at the time of this video, Losi LST shocks are no longer in production. So it is very hard to find a set of Losi LST shocks. Hopefully, if someone has an older version of the truck, they'll part it out, and you may see it on secondary markets. But for the most part, the LST shocks are extremely hard to find. And that's the shocks I would have liked to put on this truck at one point in time, especially with the Innovative RC mounts. So that's why I had purchased these up. Now, the problem with that is, since the shocks were not available, the alternative, I went with the Innovative RC shocks. Now, as you guys can see, these shocks are massive. And once I show you the springs that come with this shock, you guys are going to see why I had to go with the Cen Reaper springs on here, because the springs that I'm going to show you that came with these shocks, I don't know what vehicle those can go on. If you guys go back to some of the first run videos I did with the truck, you'll see these shocks being ran. I did not like how the suspension was not laying down, so I took these shocks off and I went back to the stock shocks. Let me show you the springs that came with this shock. Now guys, these are the springs that came with the shock. And you guys can see I'm putting all my weight behind it and trying to squeeze it. And let me try to even compress it by pushing down on it. Hopefully you can see the blood going down to my hand and trying to compress this thing. And this spring is so stiff. I don't know what vehicle you could be running on this. Maybe a fifth scale, but not this truck. This truck is way too light for these springs. And I never ran the truck with these springs. These springs are just not made to run with this truck properly. It's just not possible. I took the Innovative RC mount. I took the Innovative RC shocks off. I put the stock shocks back on there. The only problem I have with the stock shocks is the spring at the bottom of the shocks and the perch, they just come off alignment. I believe one person on one of my videos had commented that they saw the springs looked a little weird, and the reason for that is because it just comes off the perch from time to time. Now, I've had no issues while bashing this truck, but after a run, I'll notice that the perch, it's a little bit off the perch at the end of it. These shocks have performed well. Suspension, I love how the shocks are. The truck does bottom out. It rides well, guys. I do like how the suspension is set up on this truck. It is perfectly dialed in with the stock shocks on this truck and how I have it set up. The stock tires, I ran those on the first run, 6S. Way too much power, guys. It backed off this rear nut a little bit, and what was happening is the wheel actually stripped out in the inside. Now these nuts, I don't know if you guys are familiar with these nuts from Integy with the standoffs that come with them. They have a little rubber inside which locks the wheels on. I never had another issue with any of the other wheels on this truck. Only running it on 6S during that one time, did one nut back off, stripped out the wheel inside, and therefore the stock wheels were no good. I didn't care for the stock wheels too much. They balloon a lot. I didn't see where I was getting that much traction, but then again, it was on 6S and it was a ton of power. I then moved over to a set of the Duratrax, I believe it's the Split 6 belted tires on this truck. Performance, once again, wasn't all that great. I didn't really like those on this truck. I didn't think the setup was all that great. Currently, what you guys are seeing and running on the last two run videos of this truck are the Kronos V2 wheels and tires on this truck. And I vented these tires on the outside. I truly love how these tires perform on this truck. This was the best setup that I saw for this truck. And I will say it is the best performance that I've seen out of the HPI Savage XL. Perfect traction no matter where you're running this truck. I really enjoyed how this truck was hooking up. I mean, it was just dialed in. At times, it almost felt like this was a race truck. I don't know if that's because of how I had this truck set up now, but it honestly felt like I was running a race monster truck. It just handled so well, guys. But outside of that, guys, handling and suspension of this truck, by far one of the most fun RCs that I've had in a long time. Durability. Now, if you guys are following me on Instagram, as of late, I've just installed some Integy parts on here, and that is because I actually had a rear hub snap on me. The tie rod didn't snap, but the rear hub did, and I ended up, once again, talking to Chris from Everyday RC, and he suggested a new setup that I should try on this truck. So what I did was I went with the Integy casters on the front, the steering knuckles up in the front as well, and I also did the rear hubs, which eliminates the tie rod on the rear. So that is how I have the truck set up right now. I have not run it since installing all of those parts on the truck, but I'm looking forward to doing so, and I'll do that in the upcoming videos of this truck and report back to you guys how I think it performs at this point. I will say, if you drive this truck in its stock form, you may run into those issues like I was stating before in reference to the center diff, also with the brake that I had in the rear. But I will say, guys, for the most part, this HPI Savage XL is a pretty durable truck. Now, I did not drive this truck once in its stock form. I took this truck and I tore it down and did all the modifications I wanted to do this truck. So it is hard for me to speak on this truck in a stock setup. But with all the modifications that I've done to this truck, and you can see it in the description below, you now have a tank. I can honestly say, guys, this truck is just built for abuse. And as of right now, I think I have this truck just the way I want it. And I want to stop and comment about this too, guys. This body that they have put on the truck now, it is like one of those unbreakable bodies. It is a very rigid and tough when it comes to landings. The only things that you may see is like your decals may start to get some rubbing and all that other stuff, but the body itself has not gone through any cracks or damages or, you know, dents or breaks or anything like that. It has held up to a lot of tumbles that I've done with this truck. And gotta say, guys, it is probably one of the most toughest RTR bodies that you're gonna find out there. And I would strongly say to you, if you have another truck that you're looking to put a body on, you may want to look at this HPI Savage XL body. Not the clear one, I'm speaking exactly of this green body, and try and see if you can find it and put it on there. But it's a tough one. But durability, this truck held up well. And, you know, I thought it was a pretty strong and durable for what I was putting it through. No twist of the twin vertical plates. It's just a tank, guys. The Savage XL Flux is just a tank. Workability. Now, if you guys are not familiar with working with twin vertical plate chassis, it can be a little bit of a challenge. For me, I have quite a few twin vertical plate chassis trucks in my collection. So this is not the first. It's probably not even the hardest one I've ever worked on. I did work on that center diff, and that wasn't that much of an issue in getting that apart and getting that out. As you guys can see, I did the wheelie bar on the rear. That was absolutely nothing to put that in. I've changed out the servo. That was nothing to really do. I mean, to be quite honest, guys, this is not that difficult of a truck, even though it's twin vertical plate. And I know a lot of guys hate working on TVP trucks. This is not that hard to work on, as I said, especially if you've worked on TVP trucks before. So don't be afraid to wrench on it. And for those of you that look over the truck and you're seeing Phillips screws on here, I will say I have not stripped out one Phillips screw, not one. And why is that? Because HPI is using very high grade Phillips head screws on this truck. And the only reason why you're stripping out the Phillips screws on this truck is if you're using inferior tools to take it apart. Not one thing is stripped. I still replaced a lot of the screws that were on this truck back with Phillips screws on there. There's only a very minor few of screws that I actually swapped out and went to the Hex hardware, but for the most part, it's still a lot of Phillips head screws on my truck, and I kept it that way. Support. At the time of me owning this truck, HPI was just starting to ramp up. Not even to the point where they are today, where they have quite a few new releases. This was probably maybe the second iteration of them just kicking back in, like HPI just now starting up. They had only maybe one other release of the Savage XL Flux. I believe it was like a black body that was on that one. But for the most part, it was the same truck, guys. A lot of the aftermarket parts that were out there before are still out there. So reaching out to HPI or Hobby Recreations, not necessary for me on this. There's still a ton of third-party support parts that fit on this truck, a ton of parts that are out there. Guys still supporting center diffs and building center diffs for this truck. The market is out there for this truck, and because HPI is starting to ramp up, you're going to see more parts out there for this truck. For me, I've had no issues in finding parts for it. The only thing that I will say is that maybe if you're into colors, maybe the color variations that you're looking for certain parts is going to be hard to find. But if you're a little bit more forgiving on that, you'll find the parts for this truck. You'll find everything. And if not, someone's probably going to make it. But you'll find everything that you need for it. Now, if you're looking for RPM arms and all that other stuff, chances are that's going to be a difficult one for you to find. But the HPI plastics, no issues. I've had no issues with the HPI plastics on this. So in regards to support, I really haven't had a need to reach out to them, and there hasn't been any warranty-like failures on this truck which required me to reach out to HPI or even Hobby Recreation parts on this truck whatsoever. Now we get to the opinionated parts of the discussion. Is the Savage XL Flux, at the time of this video, worth it? I believe this truck right now is selling for either $799, $749, coupon, stuff like that may drop it down. I didn't pay that for this truck. I mean, I got this truck before the boom of the pricing. I think I paid $649 for this truck when it was going on, and I probably even got more coupons on it and got it down to a lower price. But I caught this truck before the boom of the price hikes that have been going on as of late. Speaking of this truck as for $750 or $799, it's a lot, guys. It's a lot. This is a larger scaled, 8 scale truck, but the problem I have with that price, it's still the same old Savage. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. Now, for those of you that are familiar with the Savage and familiar with working on one and knowing what needs to be done to get it to the point where it is a tank, great. It is a same old Savage. You know what you got to do. You know what you got to run through, and it's going to be a great truck for you. For you guys that are thinking that you can charge up some packs, put it into this truck, take this big old beast out for a run and think that you're going to have a truck that's going to perform like your Traxxas and the Armas, you're sadly mistaken. This truck, out of the box, is going to require some modifications to make it perform the way you have seen me do it on video. There are some minor things, like guys who know that the hinge pins on this truck are not captured. So you have to put zip ties on the front and rear bumpers, capture those hinge pins. There's things like knowing that this truck performs better when you have a center diff on it versus having the lock center diff. You're going through the truck and you're noticing that your slipper pad assembly is not set up right, that it needs to be locked out completely. I mean, all of these little things, you're going to go through the truck and you're going to see that for $799, it just doesn't have that out of the box experience. It's still running with T-plugs or Deans on there. You're going to have to swap out your plugs. I mean, it's minor, but little things that you're starting to say, where are we with a 6S beast like this? Why am I needing to put all of that into it? I'm already at that $800 price point. Doesn't come with a wheelie bar, but yet it's a wheelie monster. So you got to track that down. The tires are way, way too soft, especially if you're planning on running it on 6S. They're way too soft. They balloon way too much. The truck is uncontrollable. They have those wing nuts similar to what you would find on the Outcast 4S, still running on this beast, and they tend to back out even if you put Loctite on them. So you have to go to the 17mm standoff hubs that go on this truck. I mean, all of these little things, if you're not familiar with a Savage or the history of a Savage, you're sitting back and you're saying to yourself, why is this truck not performing like everybody else is on video? I mean, some people, if you're still able to find the LST shocks, you're installing the LST shocks on there. Even though I will say the stock shocks, I'm not having too much of an issue on them. I do like the stock shocks. But at $800, what are you willing to deal with? What are you willing to put up with to state at the end that it's worth $800? And that's my problem, is that at $800, this truck should have that. And maybe the next version will, because this was just like a push released, pretty much an ode to the old truck that was put out there. And that's going to lead me right into, would I buy this again? And I have to say, at that price point that it is right now, at that $800 price point, now I clearly, as I stated to you guys, I bought this, it was about $650, maybe a little bit less for this truck. At $800 US, I think there's other offerings I'm looking at this price point. With all the work that you know that you got to put into it, and every truck, I will say, you're going to have to put some work into it. There's going to be, and I'm from the finance industry, so I'm going to say there's a law of diminishing returns, where you just come back and you say, I'm not getting quite my value. No matter how much fun I'm getting out of this truck, not quite getting my value out of it. And this truck is a ton of fun, guys. I will say that. But if you're paying $800 and still having to do all of this work to get it to where this truck is today, $800 may not be at it. $650, I'm all in. I'm all in. And that's why I picked up the truck. At $800, I probably would have waited until they do the next set of upgrades to it, similar to what they did with the Savage X. And even that one, I think, falls just a little short of where it needs to be. But I strongly feel that once they do some of the upgrades, that even if they did on the Savage X, you're going to get a truck that is coming really close to what I've done to this truck today. And at that point, it's probably worth jumping in and getting it. At $800, it's probably a truck that you probably want to stay away from. Now, for those guys that are diehard Savage guys, yeah, you're going to want this truck, man. you're gonna really want this truck. If you're familiar with a Savage and you had one, let's say 10 years ago, and you want another Savage XL Flux, this truck is everything the old truck was. And if you're familiar with an HPI Savage XL, it is worth going back in and getting another one for those guys who have owned them before. But for new guys, it's one of those, I would say, if you're not willing to go ahead and go all in, don't even look at it. You must go all in on this truck. You must, once you start spending, you cannot stop. You need to go all in and make the modification changes that you've seen everybody making on this truck to get it to where you want it to be. And then you have the original basher, guys, the original king of bashers, the Savage XL. But for me, guys, I'm gonna keep this truck in my collection. I'm gonna put more packs through this. I'm gonna give this truck hell, keep running it, taking it to some other locations that I have out here on the island. But we're gonna leave it here. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Check us out on Instagram for our latest post to the channel. This is Ready Set RC, signing out. Thanks again, guys.